Right, hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to our workshop today, Graduate School Exploration, Is It Right for Me? We've got some alumni panelists. My name is Cara Snyder. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement at UC Santa Cruz. I'm also an alumna. I graduated in 2006, Crown College graduate, American Studies degree, education minor. And I've been working on campus for about 17 years in both student life and now in alumni engagement. And I'm going to pass it off to my co-presenter to introduce himself, and then we'll get to our alumni.
Thank you, Cara. My name is Yang Yang. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the International Career Coach with the Career Success team. This is my second year with UCSC. I am not an alumna of UCSC, but I'm excited to be here with the alumni members and to be presenting this workshop with my colleague, Cara. All right.
Let's go to our alumni now for some introductions. Let's start with Pam. I see Pam's video first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pam Wren, and I graduated in 1992 from Merrill College. I was an environmental studies and biology major, and I have a master's degree from library and information studies from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana. And after a few years of being an academic librarian, I changed careers. And in the year 2001, I graduated with a degree, a master's degree, an MS in civil engineering from the University of Washington, and I'm now an engineer. Oh, and Cara, did you want us to say where we work now?
Sure, yeah, say where you work,
Okay.
and then maybe pick the next one in line to introduce themselves.
Sure, and so I'm currently the engineering manager for traction power and train control for Sound Transit, which is a multi-regional transit agency here in the Seattle area. And see, Paulina Fisher, do you want to go next?
Actually, Pauline is one of our support staff behind the scenes.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't know who was he. It was Dave.
Oh, I am an alumni. I'm just a support staff today.
Thanks.
Dave, you're muted. There we go.
There we go. My name is Dave Price. I'm a team controller here at TriStar Sports and Entertainment. We are a business management firm that does accounting for the sports, music, and entertainment industries. I'm a graduate of UCSC class of 2001, Porter College. I entered the MBA program at Santa Clara University probably over 10 years after I graduated UCSC. Didn't actually finish. Kind of took a detour and my wife had the opportunity to start her own business. So kind of, I can offer a little bit different perspective there, but yeah.
Great.
Did I answer all the questions or?
Yeah, I think that's great. Why don't we go to Sage next?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Sage Melser. I am a alum, graduated in 2014. My college was Stevenson. I got a degree in environmental studies, but I did a lot of work with the combined major with the marine ecology program. While I was at UCSC, I worked for about 4 to 5 years at Ocean Conservancy, doing a lot of science to policy and business translation, and I am actually currently doing my master's study. So I'm excited for this conversation because it is a very recent lived experience for me. So I'm happy to share my thoughts and experiences.
Thank you. How about Linda next?
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Trin, and I graduated in 2003 from Merrill College. I majored in American Studies, and I minored in education. I graduated in 2010 from the UC Davis Graduate School of Management with my MBA, focusing on finance and strategy. When I was at UC Santa Cruz, I was really active in the student groups here. I was president of our Chinese Student Association. And then I'm also a first-generation college student, which I'll share more about that later. Immediately after Santa Cruz, I spent 5 years in the nonprofit sector running after-school programs in community-based organizations for low-income and immigrant students. But after business school, I worked at several companies, including Mercer Consulting, Pacific Gas and Electric, and right now Salesforce. I work in our finance transformation office at Salesforce. High level, I work on our strategic initiatives in our group and really understanding what are some of the key projects we want to initiate. So more to come there. And then I'm really excited because I want to talk about an opportunity for those who are looking for some non-traditional, you feel like you're not a traditional MBA student, what that could look like. Thank you. I think, is it anyone else left? Julia?
Jillian, yeah.
Jillian?
Hi, my name is Jillian Quinn. I graduated in 2010 from Crown College with a BS in biology and a minor in legal studies. And then I got my PhD in biophysics from Stanford in 2017. And since then, I've been working at a law firm in patent law. And I'm currently transitioning from that role into working in-house at a biotech startup. And I'm happy to talk about more about that later.
Awesome, thanks. Thanks for coming today. All of our alumni are volunteering their time today to talk with all of you all. So we really want to thank them for their time. And then you will have the opportunity to write some questions in the chat if they come up as you go along. So please feel free to do that. We're going to ask many questions of our alumni as we go through the presentation. We'll have the presentation, then we'll have the Q&A panel, and then we're going to change over to breakout rooms in a different Zoom space. It'll be a Zoom meeting, and we'll share those credentials with you later. But we really hope you stick around because you'll be able to get in the rooms and talk more in depth with these 5 alumni about their experience in grad school. So stick around at the end. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to Yang.
All right, thank you, Kara. All right, so let me start off with, a comparison between undergraduate versus graduate education, right? So just a quick recap. At the undergraduate level, we take general education and major courses, right? And oftentimes, to be a full-time student, you need to take 5 to 6 courses. So that can be quite a lot, right? And so professors typically remind you of assignment deadlines and whatnot. And grades, in terms of grades, you do well and you receive a good grade, right? And especially at the, during your freshman and sophomore where you take introduction classes, right? The classes tend to be larger in size. And so you can kind of fade away in the background, right? And it's more lecture-based format. And then for some of us, there's more time to get involved with on-campus activities. And not that I've done it, but I heard students who've done it, right? You might get away with skipping classes at the undergraduate level. Now, moving over to the graduate education, when you are enrolled in a graduate program, you tend to, narrow your focus in terms of your area of study. So for current students, right, you want to think of graduate school or graduate program as if it's a funnel, right? So as if it's a top-down triangle where your BS is very broad at the very top. When you select a grad program, you're essentially narrowing down that area of study, right? And so it's typically 2 to 4 courses, although there are more readings. And with graduate studies, you are, you're more independent, right? As a grad student, and you have to be on top of your readings, right? You have to be aware of your assignments. Professors are not going to remind you of deadlines. So there's that independence that you have to be independent. So higher standards, good grades are common and expected in graduate school. And there's the smaller cohort, right? Where you're expected to participate in lead discussions and presentations. It's more of a seminar style based classes where if you imagine, perhaps there's hundreds of applications that apply for your program, and only 15 are being selected. So it's competitive from that standpoint, right? And because of the intensity of the grad program, there's less time to be involved on campus, and it's competitive. Everyone wants to be there. So that's just a general overview of the, a brief general overview of the undergraduate versus graduate education. Next slide, please, Karen. Well, that's your slide.
All right, great. So our alumni will talk about this, I'm sure, what the process was for them in deciding, but these are some general things you want to do when you're thinking about graduate school. You really want to assess and take some time to think and reflect on what your career path is. It might wind up being different later, but like, where do you want to go? What are your values? What are your strengths? And are they going to match up with your path and the programs that you're thinking about? You also want to avoid starting graduate school kind of without a plan. And if you're not sure where you want to go, they can be expensive programs and might not be the right fit for you. So really spend that time assessing and don't just jump right in if you're not quite sure. And then you also want to assess the financial feasibility. Current students will talk about this in a moment, but consider a gap year or gap years or taking time off. And if you're in the workforce already as alumni, you might even take some time off now as you prepare for and think about grad school, and that can be really valuable. So think about those things. Questions you want to ask yourself, what am I really hoping to gain from this program? Can I meet the demands? Having heard Yang talk about what the demands of grad school are, and after talking to people who've been to those programs, is that something you can meet? Is it necessary for the career path that you're thinking of entering? Not everybody needs a graduate degree. I actually don't have one. I chose a different path. I chose to join the workforce, and that was after some thought of whether or not a grad program was right for me, and I couldn't find one that was like really latching on for me. So my career path went a different way. Think about if there will be no job opportunities for you in the career path you want to get to without a degree. That's a consideration. Is it worth the time and money? And then for your path, maybe work experience is going to be more valuable and you want to spend some time doing that before graduate school, or maybe that will be your pathway into that job that you're looking for. And then do your values and your skills fit the program? So those are just some questions to ask yourself to ponder on in your process.
All right, so to expand on the what Kara mentioned about the gap year a little bit, so there's pros and cons that you want to think about, right? As you're like, what, maybe I am going to take the gap year. So there's some pros and cons that you want to be aware of. And if you do take that gap year, or maybe a number of years, right, you'll be earning more money for perhaps school, or for other priorities that you may have. You gain experience that can help your chances for admission for particular grad programs. And it's probably a good time to relax and refocus, right? Having maybe just graduated, perhaps 4 years, or for some student a little bit longer, you need that time to relax and to refocus and to rethink about what's next, right? And can take that time to gain more life skills, as well to learn more about career choices, right? Now, on the other hand, there might be that loss of knowledge just because you've been out of academia, right, for some time. And then there might be a shift in priorities where there's the loss of momentum and motivation because of, you might have started a family, or there's bills to pay, so you gotta, continue working. So there's different priorities that may come your way, and you might have to continue that momentum, right? And then the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take you to finish. Just because let's just say if you get into your program, you might have to, start at a part-time, right? So think about that. And then there's the possible weaker ties with academic references too. All right, so Alumni Go Around. So we have two questions for our alumni panels. And I'm gonna ask the first question, anybody can chime in. How much time did you take between undergrad and grad schools? So Dave, Jillian, Linda, Sage.
So for me, I waited over 10 years to do it. And I see someone asked a question. I'll just answer this now. So in terms of coming in as an older grad, so, for me, that made it easier in the admissions process because I brought a lot of experience to the table. So it wasn't really viewed as a negative coming in, having, being a seasoned candidate.
That's very nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Jill, should we just go in order?
I can take
Right.
Oh, my answer is super easy because I didn't take any time in between. So
I can take a stab at it next. So I worked in between, and like I had said, I took about 5 years, but probably was about 3 years before I actively started working towards applying and going through the process of grad school. And that I am a huge proponent of working and getting applied experience in between, which we can go into a bit later. But I felt like that made me, a much more effective and attractive applicant. And then also just having a good perception of what my expertise and interests mean as it fits into the larger ecosystem of operation within my professional field. So people that are tangential to what I'm interested, how do I best work with them?
Very nice. Thank you, Sage.
Right. And I can go next. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay.
I can go next. I spent about 5 years as well in between Santa Cruz and UC Davis. And I agree with Sage. I think just using that time to figure out what you want to gain real experience, you could talk about on your resume. In your applications, there's questions about how you've taken on leadership roles. And I feel like you can definitely do that within applied experience. And then two, kind of like Dave said, like the more experience, the greater. I would say there is a average about 5 or so years of work experience for MBAs. So I think for those who have less than that, it's just a little bit harder maybe to kind of write those essays or to kind of bring in that experience to the school. Not that they can't. I'm just saying there's like a diversity of those the years there. So that's what I recommend as well.
All right, thank you, Linda.
As for me, I did take a gap year before my first master's. I taught English in Japan for a year. I was one of those people who, thinking back on it, I don't know how it happened actually, but I really did not think about what kind of work I wanted to do before I graduated. And then in a panic, because it was a recession in 1992, unemployment in California was 10%. I really didn't know how to get a job or if I could even manage to find a job. So I did take that gap year, and that was great. I loved what I did. And then I went back to school into a professional master's. So I knew there would likely be a job when I finished, and that was the case. And then for my second master's, it was a career change. And after that long a period, I hadn't been working in the field at all. And I really did start from the bottom when I started my new career. And that was a challenge because I was already in my early 30s. But I'm much happier in my new position, my new job, and my new career field. So it made a big difference to my life. But going back to school when I was in my late 20s was a challenge. I didn't have kids yet, so that was good, but it was still a challenge.
Yeah, just to add on to what Pam said, the professional master's more often than not requires you to have experience. So, taking additional years off to gain the relevant experience and then to go back to a grad program like an MBA is definitely going to help your chance in getting into a program. All right, was that everyone?
I think Jillian's still.
Jillian? Okay, Jillian.
oh no, I already said I didn't take any time in between.
All right.
Which I agree with Sage and everyone else that that's not necessarily the best route to go down. So it's definitely worth, I would agree that it's worth thinking about taking a gap year.
Very nice. Thank you. All right. So let me continue. Now, let's just say if you're sure, right? You're sure, or you're at a phase where you're like, let me start looking into grad programs, right? So these are my 3 tips that I want to share with you all. And the first is you want to make sure that you research the grad program within the school that you're thinking about, right? So I, met a lot of students, and they see me and they're like, hey, I want to go to the school because it's a well-known school, right? So that's a misconception that a lot of students have. You want to look into the grad programs. Just because grad programs have distinct strengths and weaknesses, right? The school's name may not be well known, but the grad program is probably top notch, right? The professors there, bring in a lot of grants, and they publish top tier research papers, and they have a lot of fundings and whatnot, right? So there's that component to it. So you want to research the grad program within the schools, and don't just apply because of the school's name. Second point is you want to talk to your professors and TAs to hear their perspectives on choosing a good program in your field, right? And the third is, well, because of COVID-19, you can't visit you can still visit a campus, but everyone's online now. So, but you can still talk to a faculty member, right? You can still email them, right? Look at the grad program. Who are the professors that may be, teaching the program, and reach out to them and to conduct informational interview, right? And obviously you can't do the sit-in on classes at this time, but definitely you want to reach out to the faculty members even before applying. So those are my 3 strategies. Go for it, Kara.
Great. So some additional tips about networking to make your decision. You could talk with friends and family too about their experiences. How did they get there? What was their decision process? Young just mentioned informational interviews. You can do those with people in programs. You can do that with other alumni. So we have something called the Career Advice Network. It's open to students and alumni, and it's free mentorship and career advice from other alumni. And some of our speakers today are actually on the network, and you might be able to connect with them there. So set up an account. It's easy if you don't have one already. As an alum, you can advise and receive advice. You can have a dual account. I'm sure you have wisdom that you can share with students, and then you can glean the wisdom from other alumni who've gone through programs there. So check that out. Some people need more help. They need a coach. We have a coaches directory we just started right now that are other Banana Slug alumni coaches who offer coaching to Banana Slugs at a discounted rate. And you can find that on the alumni website. And then you can just research, like Yang said, the faculty and the graduates from the programs and talk to them. So let's go ahead and go back to our alumni now and talk about what strategies did you use to make your decision, and who are the people you talked to? And let's start with Dave.
So for me, my decision was fairly easy. I was working in the Bay Area, and I actually ended up going to grad school. I did the evening program at Santa Clara. So I was working full time and then going to school in the evening. So I knew that I wanted a program with that flexibility. And I was really unsure. I hadn't taken the GMAT or any of that stuff. So I actually went down to the school and met with somebody there and just basically brought my resume and talked through it, told her I was thinking of applying. They encouraged me to go through the process. I went to kind of not a meet the firms, but kind of an open house that they had, and took my wife to that and just sat through it. And once I had gone through that sold me on the program. I think in retrospect, one of the things I really liked about that particular program was the cohort, and the fact that the classes being taught in the evenings were taught by professors who were actually working full-time in the Bay Area in technology companies. So it wasn't just, an academic who just researches and publishes papers. They were, CFOs at local companies or marketing experts in local companies. So that to me was really appealing, being in the business world. Anyone else?
I can go. So I'll save sort of like my in-depth strategy for how I went about picking my ideal programs for later, because I think we have a follow-up question about that. But in terms of how I sort of decided that grad school was the right pick for me, you know, I try to approach every experience I had, and I know that there's a bunch of conversations that are coming through in the chat about COVID-related issues, so I want to be really cognizant that this is a pretty unique time to be going through this when I talk about my experiences with working experience, you know, even if it was within classes, if we had guest speakers, assignments that we were working on, any internships, paid or unpaid, that I had, being really cognizant about what were the things that really got me excited and really focusing on the things that I was excited about, but I had no idea what was going on. And so that really drove me to understand where my knowledge weak points were, and starting to have conversations when I did start working with, you know, trusted advisors at work that were senior to me that I worked with, about if graduate school was the right decision. And getting back to Yang's point, really keeping a strong relationship with my faculty advisor at UCSC. I talk to him even today, probably every 6 months or so. I'm local from Santa Cruz, so we always get lunch or have a meeting and catch up. And he was great because he knew and saw my evolution in terms of academics and what I was looking for. And that was really helpful steering my decision.
Thanks. Linda, how'd you make your decision and who'd you talk to?
You know, the first question I thought about was, do I even want to go to graduate school? I remember in 2003 thinking, I graduated, I can't find a job. I should probably try. Do I go to graduate school? I remember thinking that as early on as 2003, and maybe some of you on the call are thinking that too. And I strongly urge against that, again, if you're going for an MBA route, because taking the time off in the 5 years I did really allowed me to understand what I liked, what I didn't like, where I wanted to go, and just get really practical experience. So I think as I mentioned earlier, when I was working in the nonprofit sector, it was great, but I felt a little bit limited in my career. I wanted to understand a little bit more how things work from like a fundraising, business aspect, and being an American Studies major in Santa Cruz, who didn't really take a lot of those other classes like economics or that in Santa Cruz, that was a gap for me. Like, I didn't know it. And so as I was working in the nonprofit, I also got exposed to people at a nonprofit board of directors level, people who were providing guidance and advice to our nonprofit, but not, but also having day jobs. And so I was interested in like, oh, you can also help a nonprofit but not also do something else. So that was really interesting to me. So I looked at my gaps, what could fill those gaps of wanting to learn more about how the world works. How can I be stretched a little bit and get out of my comfort zone? So I considered an MBA, an MPA, which is a Master's of Public Administration, and I considered a Master's of Public Policy as well. And I would say, just going down that route, Master's of Public Policy for me, I'm not a policy theoretical person, so that was kind of out of the gates. The second, for the MPA, I thought it was a great program. It would fit me as well. It would just be a little bit more limiting. And the MBA, you could apply to both contexts, both the public and private sector. So again, as Kara mentioned, just talking to people in the industry, people who had MBAs, and just getting their thoughts.
Thanks so much. Pam, how about you?
So when I was living in Japan and my gap year, since I hadn't really thought too much about how I was going to make a living while I was in school for some strange reason, I spent a lot of time thinking about what I was going to do next. So I didn't have a great idea of what options were open to me, actually. And thinking back on it, again, I'm sort of struck by how just how confused I really was. I had worked in libraries during school, and so I knew that I could do that as a career and it would be a stable career. I did consider getting a master's in biology or a PhD, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go to the length of getting a PhD and working as a professor. And so, and I figured I wouldn't really want to get a master's if I didn't want to go to the PhD route, and I wasn't sure what the careers would be for a master's in biology. So I think almost in sense of being overwhelmed and not really understanding my choices very well, and even being a little isolated in Japan in certain ways, I made a decision to go with something I knew I would be able to find a job at, which is academic libraries. And I reasoned I could work with biologists and with biology professors, with other scientists as a librarian, and that definitely turned out to be true as an academic librarian. And as for some of these professional masters, you don't need experience, and that's true for, it's definitely true for masters. I mean, for MBA, you would want experience. But for a Master of Library Information Science, you don't need that much experience really at all. And so it was pretty easy to get into a program. And I knew there'd be a job waiting for me afterwards. I did some research on that, and that was true. For my civil engineering master's, because I was working in engineering libraries, I had a lot of contact with engineers. And there's a pivotal moment when I realized that I was more interested in what they were going to go do after they talked to me in the library than I was in what I was going to do after they left. And so I was like, well, I need to do something different, and it seems really compelling. And I had access to a lot of professors and students and got to talk to them about that, and took a couple of classes actually before I entered into the program to find out if I could keep up academically, and I really liked it, and that worked out really well. And so I think that's a good strategy too, to try to take a few classes beforehand if you're not sure, to see if you really like it.
Wonderful, thanks. And Jolynn?
So I had decided on the field that I wanted to do my graduate work in all by myself, pretty much. I was like, oh, biology is such a squishy field. I want to make it more quantitative. I'm going to pick biophysics, because I researched different biology fields, and I was like, I thought this was the one that most aligned with how I wanted to do research. And then after that, I went and I talked to some of my professors on campus, particularly my chemistry professor, and I asked them, oh, what do you think the interesting questions are in this field? What would you try to research if you were going into this field at this point in time? Because that sort of, all the graduate programs in PhD, they're dependent on the professors at the universities and what those professors are researching. So you can't just go to any university and research anything you want. You're restricted a little bit by what the professors there care about. So if you already know sort of what kinds of questions you want to ask, what sort of subfields you want to research, that will inform what schools you're going to apply to, because you'll look at the professors at those schools, and then you'll have a better idea of what you can do when you're there. That was my path.
Awesome, thank you. I love how diverse all your answers are, and the experience you're bringing from so many different fields. Thank you. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about how to find other alumni. So if you have a LinkedIn account and you go to the UC Santa Cruz school page, there's this feature, this alumni tool. If you click on that, you can search for alumni who have the same degree as you, who work at the company you're interested in, similar to the Career Advice Network, but not all of our alumni are on the Career Advice Network. So you can go here and you can just look to see where people got jobs with the same degree that you've got, or what graduate schools they went to. It's just another way that you can kind of investigate a career path that you're thinking about. I also want to talk about professional presence online. Hopefully you have a LinkedIn account. If you don't, I highly recommend creating one. It is the largest professional networking application globally. When you're looking for jobs, and some of this applies to graduate school, but when you're looking for jobs, over 80% of employers are going to either Google your name or look for you, your presence online before considering your application. And 94% of companies use social media in their decision-making process. 92% use LinkedIn. And so some of these schools might be looking at your LinkedIn profile too to see what you studied. You know, LinkedIn, you can share your projects, you can share the collaborations you did, even when you were an undergrad. So it's a way to showcase your work and your interests and the questions you're asking and the type of work that you want to do and go into. So consider that, build your profile, and think about how you represent yourself on all social media platforms and the privacy settings, and who can see it and who can't. some tips about LinkedIn, some things that are going to make it much more likely for you to be recognized, searchable on there. Having a photo is number one. Using your headline to entice people, you know, the headline right below your name doesn't have to be your job title or that you're a student, but it could be a statement about, what you're passionate about, what you want to do in the world, and that'll catch people's attention more than just, for me, example, my job title is long and kind of boring. So I put something else there to catch people's attention. And then use it as a way to just show your professional identity, explain what you have to offer. Always want to be saying what you have to offer a company or a school as opposed to starting or leading with what you need. And with that, I'm going to hand things back over to Yang.
Oops, I was muted. All right, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the different types of programs. And we, classify, we put them into different categories just to help you conceptualize in different programs a little bit better. So there's the academic doctoral, traditional masters, professional masters, traditional professionals, right? And I think, today's webinar, I believe many of our alumni panelists their grad degree or grad programs are in the professional masters, correct? So let's go, just briefly touch on the academic doctoral PhD, EDD, right? It's research-based. It typically takes you 4 to 7 years to earn the degree, and it requires a major research project with dissertation. The traditional master, the MS, MA, research-based, 2 to 3 years. Similar to the academic doctoral, it's a research with thesis or a capstone. And a capstone is just a culminating projects that develop over the course of the program instead of writing original research. That's the difference. Professional masters, they can include MS, MA, MBA, MPH, MHA, and they're practice-based, but can be cross-disciplinary. And some programs can be as short as 1 year, just 1 year, you get the degree, up to 3 years. And it requires a research project or capstone, similar to the traditional masters. And then we have the traditional professional, the MD, the medical doctor, the DDS, the doctor of dental surgery, I believe. And then the PharmD, pharmacist, JD for a Juris Doctor, DPT, Doctor of Physical Therapy, and then the MSW, the Master of Social Work. And these programs tend to be practice-based. It'll take you around 3 to 5 years to get one of these degrees, and require a clinical practitioner training type of program. All right, the timeline. This apply to you if you are, you're a current student, right? So this might make sense if you are at this point. We're in October already, but ideally, if you already know that you want to go to grad school, you want to start researching at the end of your junior year. So that spring quarter, the spring semester of your junior year, you want to start research potential school, take practice exam, take practice entrance exam, meaning you want to start looking into the GRE or the different exams that are required for the grad programs that you're applying to, right? And then for us, now that we're in October, I can talk a little bit about October. It's not too late, right? So October, that's where you now are in your first, for DCSC, first fall quarter. So first fall quarter. So you can, in a way, go back and do all the checklists, right? Starting from back in May. So you can still do all that too. So it's not too late. It's just a general checklist for y'all to go by. So, and just a quick note that most grad programs open their applications in October, and they close, the deadlines are typically, they close at the end of December. So that's the general timeline for most grad programs. think you muted, Kara.
Thank you. Back to me for talking about if you're considering a PhD. We all have different perceptions about what a PhD is going to do for you. And so we want you to think about these things and just know that more than half the people with PhDs wind up with careers outside of academia. There's some statistics in here. Not all PhD people are going to have tenure track positions. In fact, only about 15% do at universities. Think about your goals after the PhD and don't just fall back on this notion that you can stay in academia with that degree for the rest of your life. And then some programs allow you to go straight to a PhD program from a bachelor's, but other ones don't. And some programs are dual, so you work to get your master's and then your PhD in the same program. So just look at those things as you're considering schools. There's lots of different assessments that you can do that are self-directed. Here are a few of them, and we'll be sharing this recording and we'll be sharing these slides with those who attended. So don't worry, you can come back to this, and I think we can chat some of these to you right now. There's different assessments for different types of fields: science, humanities, and then PhDs and beyond academia. So consider those, look into those, and they can help you make your decision. Okay. Yay.
So just a quick note on the regarding the application process. It's very similar to when you apply to your undergraduate admission. So these are the typical requirements: graduate admission exams, letters of recommendation, statements of purpose, or the personal statements, your academic resume or CV, transcripts, and for some programs, they do require that interview component. Kara and I are going to touch on the first three. Kara, next slide. All right, so the graduate admission exam. As the international career coach, I've met a lot of students, right? And so they come to me and they're like, hey, I didn't do really well on my GRE and I tell them it's not the end all, right? Just remember that the application checklist or the requirements, you're going to be evaluated on different components. So the GRE, even if you don't do well in it, it's not the end all, right? And in fact, this year might be, for some of you, even though with COVID-19, might be a good year in terms of graduate schools are waiving the GRE, right? Because of COVID-19, and test centers are closed. So you want to look at the grad programs. If you are applying this year, you want to look at the grad programs and reach out to the coordinator or who manages the application, because they might not update yet on their website, but you want to just call and say, hey, is the GRE waived, right, for this upcoming year? So you want to call them. You want to make sure, because a lot of graduate school are waiving the GRE this academic year. And then for some grad programs, they still require the GRE. So on the ETS website, the company that runs the GRE, they have the GRE general test at home available. So you might have to go through that approach to take the GRE, to take it from home. So just be aware of that. And you receive results typically 2 weeks after taking the exam, and there's time for you to retake, show you not like the scores. Some schools do require, some grad programs require you to take specific subject tests. So you want to be aware if, in addition to the general GRE exam, you might have to take specific subject tests. So be aware of that. And for the specialty exam, I believe the GMAT, LSAT, the NCAP, and the other exam, they have an online version as well. So you want to just be aware of that.
Okay, and then in terms of letters of recommendations, some tips around here. You want to get, most schools are going to require 3. It's best to have a couple faculty members and maybe an employer if you have the workforce experience, but make sure it's in the field that you're looking to enter, that letter is from. ask in advance. 1 month is great. 2 months is awesome. Give people time to put them together for you. Ask them first if they can provide a positive reference for you. You don't necessarily know how everyone sees your work, so make that your request. Can you give me a positive referral letter of recommendation for this grad program? Provide them with all the info. If there's links, tell them why you're interested, and tell them that there's specific things you want them to highlight that they've seen in your work. If they still need additional information, offer that and send them reminders. You know, everything's pretty much online now, so you're not going to be having handwritten or hand-typed letters, but there's going to be links and there's going to be processes. So make sure they have all that information to get it in for you to complete your application.
And just a quick note about the personal statement and the statement of purpose. I get questions about these two all the time. Just know that with the personal statement, it's really that personal narrative that you want to narrate, right? So your personal narrative, personal experience that have prepared you for the program, why you're applying, touch on personal goals. For the statement of purpose, you want to describe the students that you have become, passion for your field, detailed research goals, and in terms of why you're applying, you want to touch on professional goals. So these are, some of the differences. Some programs sort of blend the two together, so you only have one statement, just the personal statement, but they might want you to touch on your professional goals and that personal statement. I put down additional tips here at the bottom. You want to include info about classes, professors whose work you admire, the missions and value, and how they align with your own missions and value. So you want to think outside the box, right? And so you can talk about, in a way, if you're able to show that to the search committee, you're showing them that you researched the program, right? You know that the program is right for them. So you want to do that. And at the end of the day, my advice to you is to reread the questions, right? Because every grad program is going to be different. They're going to have different set of questions for you to answer. So just read and reread the questions. Make sure that you address the questions as well. That's really important.
Great. And in addition to this workshop, there's lots of tools online. Here's some of them to help you find programs and research them. I think Peterson's and gradschools.com are kind of top of the list, but we'll share these. I think that one of our staff will share these links in the chat for you, and you'll have this presentation afterwards. But there's more resources out there to make your decision and find them. Now we're going to go to one last little go around with our alumni before we close the webinar portion, and then we're going to go over to the networking rooms where each of our alumni today are going to be in a separate breakout room, so you can go in there and ask them your questions, dig a little bit deeper. So right now we're going to go around, and I'd like each of our alums to answer these 3 questions. Answer them all at once before we pass it off to the next person. But what did you wish you had known before going to graduate school? The strategies were most helpful in selecting your program and applying, and would you have done anything differently? And let's go ahead and do our same order. Let's start with Dave.
Okay, for me, I think going into grad school, mine was a bit of a different scenario. I didn't really have a choice at the time. I had to work and put myself through grad school. If I could have done it differently, I probably Can you hear me? Okay. If I could have done anything differently, I would have just knocked it out and gone to a full-time program. That was just a function of my circumstances. But I also waited 10 years. I think it's really important to have experience going into an MBA program, especially in the cohort, because with the cohort programs, you're going into a program with 20 or 30 individuals, whatever the size of your class is, and you're going to carry through with those individuals through the entire program. So if you don't have experiences you can draw from in the business world or in your professional life, you're just not kind of contributing as much to the group. So, I guess I would have done a full-time program, and I probably would have done it 5 years sooner. As far as strategies, I didn't put much thought into the school that I was going to, because I had to go to school at night. So if I were going to be looking at different schools or different areas, I'd say having, I've lived all over the place throughout California, Tennessee. I lived in Australia for a year. I think it's helpful if you know what you want to do and you know where you want to be to attend a program kind of in the area of where you want to end up. I know just from a recruiting perspective, a lot of the firms that I've been at, we tend to recruit locally first before going out to different cities. So there's always that relationship aspect of recruiting and finding your next opportunity. So had I known that I was going to end up in Tennessee, maybe I would have opted for a program, in Nashville. But that's all that really comes to mind.
Thanks, Dave. Sage, how about you?
Okay, so I'm gonna do kind of the first and the last one together, because I think that they're the same answer for me. Most schools, particularly professional programs, because I don't think that I mentioned exactly which program I'm in. I'm at the Yale's School of the Environment program, working also with their business school. So it's a professional program, and they publish statistics on where students typically end up within 5 years of graduating from their program, which I think is really helpful. One, because it gives you a sense of the skills and then also the alumni network that are very, very key in sort of securing positions and steering you towards the right professional goals you want. I think for what my interests are personally, I'm definitely leaning more towards the private sector upon graduation. And while there is a significant percentage of students that do go into the private sector out of my program, the vast majority is nonprofits and sort of multidisciplinary and multilateral bank think tank type of institution. So I do have to do a little bit more legwork on my own there, and it would have been helpful to have that transparency going in. In terms of the strategies, I very much support that funnel analogy. So I would recommend, and I did this and it was hugely helpful, of just sitting down and doing 2 laundry lists. One of organizations, not universities, organizations that you think are doing really cool work, and just list them. Same thing with people. It could be Bill Gates, it could be David Attenborough, whoever, just make those lists. And what's really helpful when I did that, I started to clearly see patterns in the types of organizations and the types of individuals I was writing down. So that can kind of help you think about and show yourself what are the key things that are really interesting. Is it international work? Is it academia? It helps you kind of narrow down what your focus is. And then with that list of individuals, you would be so surprised, and I cannot stress enough, cold calls or cold emails are huge. I don't know how many times I was able to actually have an hour of time with directors, executive team members of really large institutions, because people love talking about themselves and what they do for a living. It's really, really impactful. And the reason why that's important is you can understand what programs they went to, what degrees they got, what were the skills that they saw that they gained as students, or their time as students, that they really use on a day-to-day basis in their current role. They also can provide you connections with their advisors and faculty members at their programs, which then leads into, okay, I have this final list of graduate programs I'm interested in. I know that this has been really impactful for the institutions and the professionals that I would like to be when I grow up. And then talking to those people in the institutions is huge. As a personal example, once I went through that funnel, I was ultimately put in contact with a professor who sat on the admissions committee, and he essentially told me exactly what they were looking for in terms of applicants and exactly what I needed to include in my admissions application essay to be a ideal candidate. And at the end of the day, the whole thing is they should be expecting your application, right? Like they should be looking for it, and having those conversations and really making those personal connections is going to be your best bet at that, because that's going to be helpful in terms of securing a position and then also advocating for larger grants and funding opportunities.
Wow, Sage, what a great example of networking as a pathway to your program and career. Thank you. Linda.
Great. So a couple of things. I think first and foremost, what I wish I knew was about money. So I think there's some questions about funding the program. I didn't know this, but when I received my acceptance letter to UC Davis, I also got an offer for 50% of my 50% scholarship. And that was surprising for me because I didn't apply. It kind of just came with the program. And so that was surprising to me. And then I also applied to UC Irvine's program, and they gave me a scholarship. I think it was like 25% to 30% of the tuition as well. So for those asking about, there's scholarships for graduate programs that might be private through organizations. It actually might be through the school, because the school fundraises a lot as well to provide scholarships to students as well. So it was a pleasant surprise for me. The second piece, there was a question about other ways to fund your education. I was able to supplement that with the financial aid process. So I did a FAFSA as well. Don't forget about that. That still exists when you're outside of UC Santa Cruz. So that's still applicable for graduate school students too. So I took out loans for the remaining program. And then in terms of the grad program, I think I shared I was more from the American Studies background. I kind of was a little bit not confident that my application would be very strong. I thought I didn't fit the mold of an MBA. I thought I was actually kind of behind or second class to a lot of applicants. And so what I wish I knew before was that actually when you go into the program, there's a lot of people who maybe they had a business background and they hate it. They want to do something completely different, or they want to continue. Or maybe there's people in my class that were musicians that wanted to study more. There's people who wanted to work in the winemaking industry. So I think for me, the MBA program is more diverse than I thought it would be. Not everyone's going to be, X career afterward. So that was really something I thought about, and I wish I kind of, again, got more confidence in being proud of my background and my application from the beginning. And then lastly, again, I did American Studies. I didn't take any kind of business classes here at Santa Cruz. I was drinking from a fire hose. So if you can take any kind of statistics, economics, or finance classes now, or at a junior college beforehand, please do so, because the pace is way faster in the grad program. So take your time with those as well. And then I'll echo Dave in terms of selecting programs. Try to select programs you're going to want to settle. So for me, I went to Davis because I knew I wanted to stay in the San Francisco Bay Area because of my friends and family there. And so as Dave mentioned, there's a lot of recruitment happening in a local vicinity. Look at where, maybe like at Davis, look at where they place their students. They publish this every year. If you want to work for something like at a Salesforce, like, hey, what schools kind of place people at Salesforce? They'll have that roster. So kind of like to Sage's idea of a list, like do research on what people are touting as their the connections they have, because it'll be easier for you to hopefully get a job that way because the school has a program. And again, for MBAs, they have the top, I feel like it's called top news report ranking, like top 50, top 60 in the news report. That's also a list I looked at to select my program. And I think last but not least, I think that just advice, if you're active in the UCSC community, continue doing that, because even in professional world, you can use that to apply for your statement. You could talk about those like leadership experiences you take outside of your professional experience too.
I can just add to one thing that Linda said. So when when I went into my MBA program, I guess I knew that I was going to be taking kind of a repeat of some classes. You know, I did the business management economics program at UC Santa Cruz, and going into my MBA, I guess it didn't really fully occur to me that I would literally be taking some of those same classes again, because when you go into an MBA program, you're going into it with people who, you know, maybe they did American studies or they did history or they're engineers and they've never seen Excel before. And so for me, that was really frustrating because, you know, I already had a degree in business, and I had, you know, I spent a lot of money to take those courses over again with people that just, you know, had, you know, it was all new to them. So, you know, it's not really until you get into the kind of upper division of the program that you really start to differentiate and get into specific classes. So it's just something to be aware of. You know, you're going to be in school with people from all different backgrounds and experience levels.
I love that we have your two experiences to juxtapose, because I think there's going to be a wide range of folks here that are going to relate to either one of those. Thank you. Pam, how about you next?
Sure. So thinking back, I think for my library degree, I had this romantic notion of going back to the Midwest because I had grown up in Chicago, and I really did not enjoy Champaign-Urbana. It's nothing like Chicago. It's really pretty quiet town, pretty rural. So that was pretty tough for me actually to go back. And I mean, I was happy with the program, but I will echo what some other folks have heard, which is, you know, the people you go to school with and the professors you have are going to be the ones that are going to form your network, and they're the ones who are you're just going to know as you pursue your career. And some careers are more national, like academic librarianship, like that's a national career. Like yes, you'll get a job locally, but it's like professors, you know, you compete and you compete for positions nationally at that level. So it's not as important where you go to school. But you know, folks will give you references to places that they know. And if you're going to a school in the Midwest, well, you're going to have references to places in the Midwest. And the same was true when I got my engineering master's. I did an internship as part of that program, and the people I met, I'm still colleagues with them now, as both in terms of where I was interning and also where I was going to school, where I went to school. So you do exit school with those relationships, and they will help you, and you'll enjoy those throughout your career. And it will just definitely benefit you more if you're going to school in the place where you think you want to end up, even if you don't stay there permanently. In terms of strategies for selecting and applying to the grad program, I mean, there's all kinds of factors. I think for me, the biggest one was what did I want to do afterwards? Obviously, like where was I trying to get to? I did consider if I wanted to do a PhD. Like there were some places that didn't have a library PhD, and I was considering maybe going on to that level. So I just automatically discounted those. And then in terms of my civil engineering program, as I said, I took a few classes beforehand, and I had exposure to all kinds of engineers and scientists. And so I think it was really helpful what some folks have said about what excites you. Like, what do you find yourself wanting to know more about? And also just what do you think you can handle in terms of the academics? Because, you know, I didn't think I could handle some of the subjects I was interested in terms of following along and having a background that wasn't super quantitative. So I had to kind of settle for a middle ground, but that didn't make me unhappy. I ended up in a good place. I don't think I would have done very much differently. I could talk a little bit about funding, because in STEM fields, you know, I didn't pay very much at all. I didn't pay at all for my civils master's. The government paid for that. And I didn't even have to apply for money because there's a lack of folks in those fields. So I think if you're concerned about paying and you have those talents, you may want to consider a field that's slightly adjacent to where you want to end up, just in terms of being able to fund your graduate program. And then and then fill in with the work a little bit. There are different ways to get to the same career. So you may want to consider if there's an alternate path that will get you to the same place that will cost less to get there. That is important, of course.
Thanks so much. All right, Jillian, how about you?
So I guess I'll answer the first two kind of together because for me, those are very similar. And the things that I think I wish I'd known before going were sort of the importance of picking your PI. This is really important because that's the person who's going to be in charge of your life for the next 4 to 6 years. So you want them to be a good person who will treat you well. And I also wish that I had known more about what I wanted to do with the PhD, what the opportunities were at the end of that whole process. It can be really hard to keep going when you're in the middle of your 7 years as a graduate student. So it's very helpful to have an end goal in mind and to sort of know why you're putting all the effort in to get there. And I think in terms of like sort of selecting the school, again, you really need to read about the professors at that school and make sure that there are a bunch of them there, not just one person. Don't just go to a school for one person because there's no guarantee that you'll get into their lab or that you'll end up liking them or that they'll have funding for you. So you should go places where you'll have options, or you should think about doing that. And part of that is you can also look up grant funding. So I'm coming at this from the science background. This is totally different for humanities and for other kinds of fields. But in the science world, you can look at NIH grants that professors and universities have gotten. And working for a lab that has the funding to support you throughout your time there is really important. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly worried about writing grants and doing things like that, and it's going to circumscribe what you can do. So that's just something else that I had no idea of when I was coming into the PhD. And you can ask current graduate students what their experience is like. They don't normally get people who want to talk to them. So just look at people in the program that you care about and like email them, like Sage said. Not maybe cold call them because they're not going to answer their cell phone, but like send them a cold email. You know, a lot of people will write back to you. If you ask for their advice, they will be happy to respond. So I strongly encourage you to do that. I always thought that it was silly of the people applying to my program that they didn't care what we current students thought. And we would have, been happy to talk to them. And you can also ask professors, but they're going to give you a very different perspective of what it's like at the university. So that's why it's important to ask the current students, because the student body morale can have a big impact on your experience. And then fourth, and this is kind of speaking to like what Pam was talking about, is it someplace that you want to live? You're going to be there for a few years, and maybe not during this time when we're all on Zoom, but in more normal periods of time, you're going to be there for 4 or 5 years. And I'll tell you, a lot of people got bored with Palo Alto. They're like, this is the most boring college town ever. So, it was a big deal for a lot of people. And yeah, I guess if I were going to do anything differently, so this is getting into like the nitty gritty of the PhD and the graduate program, I would have chosen a less ambitious research project. I'm going to emphasize that, less ambitious. Okay, you want to be able to finish it. And you want to be able to publish something on what you did. This is just like really important in terms of your further career. I'm going to guarantee, unless you're brilliant, no one cares what your graduate research publications were, okay? They just care that you had a publication. And so that's just, if I had done that, I would have had more fun in graduate school, and I wouldn't have ended up working every single weekend, which is another thing I wish I hadn't done. I should have taken just like a little bit longer to graduate and not like killed myself. And then I think the final nitty-gritty detail is to do fewer experiments. That is what I also wish I had done, because an actual experiment, this is going to vary from field to field, but an experiment does not matter if you're not asking a good question. And so I think part of the scientific process is being really thoughtful about what kinds of questions you're asking and what that exact experiment is going to help you answer. So if you have a poorly designed experiment or something, or your data doesn't really help you get to the question you want to answer, it doesn't matter. And then you're not going to get a publication, and then it's going to take you longer to graduate, and so on and so forth. So those are just like really detailed things that I did not think about. No one in my immediate family has done a PhD, so I was kind of like on my own. I didn't know anyone in a PhD program. It was really hard to do it all by myself. So I wish I'd reached out to more people, talked to strangers, and been really thoughtful about what I was doing. And I hope you all can do that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, in a minute here, we're going to hop over to network. I know you have some questions. Some of them have been answered, some have not. So make sure you join us over in the networking, because there's going to be separate breakout rooms with each of our alum here. But a couple of things before we do that, I just want to give a big burst of gratitude for our volunteers for being here today, and for my co-presenter, Yen Yang. Next week is, guess what? Professional Graduate School Week at UCSC, and there's different days and different events. And actually, if you it's open to alumni and students. If you register in Handshake, you can attend with these schools, talk to them about their programs. And actually, we're doing a giveaway of $100 Amazon gift cards. So if you register for one of the one-on-one sessions with one of the graduate schools, you can enter into a drawing for that. But there's the dates, and they can be found on the Career Success website to learn more.